Hello, it is arplenoon, also known as Phoenix. We are on chapter 14 of the Bridge Jumpers. This is just a casual reading, so there will be no editing. I am just reading this off and uploading it right away. Excuse me. If you would like to follow along with this AU, please look up my name, arplenoon, on archiveofourown.org. And you will find it under the Bridge Jumpers. There's also all my other Undertale AUs there as well. Alright, summary. Era and PJ dive into the void in search of ink. While there, they find an isolated multiverse where ink has been trapped. However, the both of them are about to encounter something truly horrifying. While Era pulled up a monitor to calibrate the coordinates of Ink's location, PJ let his gaze drift to the others. Diva hadn't said much, prodigal sister. She looked shaken and tired, but her attention held on Swap intensely. She and Rhyme both wanted to see their family return safely. Another Sans had been brought into the doodle sphere. Even PJ made the initial mistake of calling him Murder. His name is Legion, but call him Lee, she said, noticing PJ's gaze. Oh, right, said PJ, realizing Lee was asleep, head resting in Diva's lap. The void is far less friendly than the anti-void, said Error. There won't be much air, if any. We're gonna need oxygen masks, flashlights. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to pack food and wear hazmat suits for the worst-case scenario. On it, said Gradient. Gradient spoke softly and began constructing the supplies from ink. Paper Jam, are you sure only you two should go down there? Said Skep. I think the doctor's right, PJ pointed his thumb to Epic. If we get trapped, at least it will only be us two. Besides, I prefer you to secure Prodigal and G and Luna once they're found. Era took a pause, gazing about with nervous eyes. Something wrong? Said PJ, noticing the silence. It's just, well, if I can't get out, I have a little girl back home. Could someone look after her for me? Oh, right, Cambria. PJ gave a smile and looked to Fresh. I think that can be managed. Fresh smiled and gave a nod. No problem, broski. You're part of the fam after all, Error. A groan and a blue blush. Error looked away. Sure. Gradient and Tembla put together the supplies they needed, but instead of hazmat suits, Gradient made fully functioning astronaut suits, with built-in oxygen supplies, a pink one for PJ, a blue one for Error. The glitchy skeleton seemed anxious about the contraptions, though impressed as Gradient instructed them how to put them on. After which, Gradient used his stylus to construct a pulley system feeding his green strings through enough... One second. Gradient used his stylus to construct a pulley system, feeding his green strings through before fastening to each of the suits. Huh, awfully clever, Error mumbled. Paper Jam smiled. Yeah, Ink says he's a genius. Right, well, there's no use in waiting any further, said Error. He turned, holding up his hands to open a portal, leading into the pitch black. They shared a glance before securing their helmets and flicking on the attached lights. Come back safe. We're counting on you, said Fresh. We will, and we'll bring Ink back too, said PJ with a thumbs up. Good luck, little big bro, said Pallet, waving. Pallet waved, his smile full of hope. Silently, Error headed towards the darkness and leapt through. PJ rushed to follow, figuring Error wasn't the type for heartfelt partings. At first, it seemed as he expected, floating like the anti-void, except darkness. His light shining on Error was the only way he could see him. Looking up, the portal grew smaller faster than expected, as if they were falling. Keep your eyes out for anything that might look like an AU. I got as close as possible, but things might move around here like currents. Error's voice came through PJ's helmet communicator. Alright, we'll do... Ah! Just then, it felt like something slammed into PJ's body, tossing him about in the darkness. He lost sight of Error momentarily before seeing the flicker of his light again. PJ! Error called. Reaching hand forward instinctively, then must have remembered he could use his strings from within the suit. Then remembered he couldn't use his strings from within the suit. Grunting, Air summoned a gaster blaster next to PJ, who barely caught onto its jaw. What felt like hurricane-force winds pounded against Paper Jam. Hands and arms racked with pain, he held on dearly. Error, able to pull them back together, locked arms with PJ before the blaster disappeared. You alright? I'm okay. PJ huffed, heavy breath against the glass. He smiled, glad they hadn't been separated. From Error's helmet, he spied a grin as well. I don't know what that pinging was. I did not like that. That came from my computer. Let me see. Where was I? The portal, long out of sight, only had the green strings that bound them only the green strings that bound them showed evidence they remained connected to the doodle sphere. Floating in silence, they continued looking around. Eventually, PJ caught the faintest shimmer in the distance. He had to shift his head a bit before the light fixed on a cluster of white spots. There, he pointed. Era nodded. Summoning another blaster, the glitchy skeleton pulled them closer to what appeared to be an old scrapbook, its crumbling pages floating about on thin threads. This must be it. It's huge, said PJ, gently reaching for a page. Era grabbed the scrapbook proper. It's a whole multiverse. That can't be. Then which one is ink in? You start at that end, I'll search through this one. With a nod, Paper Jam gently pulled and flipped a page at a time. There were so many depictions of humans, monsters, locations, systems of magic, technology, written tales. The contents were far richer than he expected, and nothing he recognized from the patterns of their world. Even so, many pages were worn, torn, burned, moldy, corrupted. Eric gave a curious groan. This is from beyond our reality. The chances of us seeing universes like this is in the tens of millions of a %. No wonder Dad got stuck in here. It's so full, but so empty. I haven't seen any souls, only husks. It's cold and full of sadness. Something like this is too dangerous to bring back. If this multiverse was revitalized within ours, it would cause a force of chaos beyond our control. We should get ink out and destroy it. PJ's eyes widened. But destroying this world would be a tragedy. Imagine what we could learn from... PJ, if you only trust me once, be it right now. I'm not saying this as a destroyer. This AU is capable of unimaginable damage. It could rewrite everything we understand about our multiverse. Falling quiet, Paper Jam could hear the sincerity in Error's voice. He lowered his gaze back to the pages. Alright, let's just find ink. But the both of them continued scanning before PJ stopped. Broomy! Ink's brush is on this page! Air drifted over. The brush lay in a dark forest amid a rainstorm. He wouldn't have willingly left that behind. Alright, let's take a look. Both of them touched the page and passed into the AU. Rain pattered against their helmets and shoulders. The soft earth gave at their feet. Turning about, PJ saw they were still connected by the green strings to a floating square, the shape of the page. Air reached down to Broomy. Doing so, his hands found Ink's vials, soaked in mud. The skeletons shared a glance before a warm glow lit up beyond the trees. Firelight through the windows of the cabin in the distance. Paper Jam and Air made their way carefully through the brush and towards the light. Their feet grew heavier with the caking of mud at their feet. Drawing closer, they could see the cabin stood in a clearing. The warm light stretched out on all sides. Emerging from the line, PJ's eyes were drawn towards the yard. A large pile of dirt stood pounded by the rain. A shovel stuck into it. Next to it, a large rectangular hole in the ground. Era moved ahead first, glancing between the cabin and the hole. PJ followed Era's gaze into the darkness. The hole was filled with rainwater. Within contained a crude wooden coffin. That's a human grave. Why is it just in the middle of a yard like this? Something knew we were coming, Error said, meeting PJ's eyes. We were meant to find this. Something? Then it dawned on him. PJ shook his head and backed up. A laugh of fear escaped him as he pointed. No, no, Ink, he's not. Why would Ink be in a human grave? That can't be him. Monsters don't dust in this AU. They leave corpses like humans. Error, you don't think he's... PJ's voice trembled. Only one way to find out. Help me down, said Error, crouching to enter the grave. For a moment, PJ swallowed his terror to join Error's side and help him down. Feet splashed in the rising water. Carefully straddling the coffin, Error went to open it, having to yank a few times to free the rotten wood. Sure enough, a body wrapped in linens just Ink's size. PJ had to breathe. Turning away, he lifted the helmet glass and heaved. He could feel his whole body going into a panic. No. Paper Jam! PJ, look at me! Error called back his attention. Listen, I know you're scared. It's gonna be alright. Is he dead? PJ muttered to speak. I don't know. But we have to get him out of this hole. I need you to hold it together. I can't get him out on my own. Taking deep breaths, PJ nodded. He had to set his mind elsewhere, anywhere but here, to help Error in the body out of the grave. Once out, PJ looked away, holding himself. Thoughts raced with terror that his father might be dead and would turn to dust if they pulled him from the AU. All right, let's get him inside, said Error, carrying Ink. Reluctantly, PJ followed toward the cabin. Error's hands full, PJ opened the door. It looked lived in, with all the furniture and supplies someone would need to live in on their own. However, everything had been pushed to the walls, even the bed turned on its side. The floor had been whitewashed and marked with the symbols in charcoal. The fireplace burned brightly, candles and incense already lit surrounding a ritual. An outline had been drawn at the center for the body. At the head, an old spellbook stood propped open, waiting for them. What the fuck? PJ looked to Error. He was right when he said something knew they were coming. But turning his head again, PJ could see no one else there with them. Carefully, Paper Jam approached the book, crouching down to read the contents of the open page. Resurrection? Whoever did this, they're expecting us to play by this world's rules, said Error. Hesitantly, he laid Ink down at the center of the ritual before taking off his helmet to observe the book. An appeal to the gods to restore the soul. But Ink didn't have a soul. Not monster, not human, but alive. I don't know, but we have to wake him up somehow, said Error, turning back to Ink. Searching Ink's body, Error found the end of the linens to begin unwrapping him. The smell of decay and earth made PJ shiver as he turned back to the book for guidance. A large diamond lay on the floor in front of it. Alright, so the diamond is supposed to restore the soul when used in the incantation. He glanced back to see his father's face, the sockets wide and lifeless. Even the bones seemed to have become more flesh than magic. His scarf wrapped around his head to form a hood. The clothes and tattoos on his arms and ribs confirmed it to be Ink. Although new tattoos adorned his skull. Brown knitted, Error gave a huff. Ink, you look like shit. Alright, what's it say we need to do? Following the instructions, PJ placed the diamond on Ink's chest. PJ took off his gloves, requesting the same of Error before holding Ink's hand. We need to form a link. I have to hold your hand and you hold Ink's other. Error sighed. Should have guessed. Alright, then we just need to recite the verses. PJ nodded to the book. Error looked over to read it before both started chanting together. They repeated the incantation for several long minutes. For a while, PJ feared they might have been doing something wrong. Just as he thought to stop, the diamond cracked, leaking black smoke. Error and PJ fell back, startled, as the diamond disintegrated into coal before sinking through Ink's ribs. Paper Jam felt Ink's fingers flex in his hand. Dad, can you hear me? He said, moving back to look over the skeleton. Air moved as well, touching Ink's shoulder to shake him. When Ink didn't respond, Air used blue magic to something black and flesh-like rose in front of Ink's chest, connecting black inside the rib cage like fibrous links. The skeleton awakened, gasping, but his sockets remained dark. Still, he turned his skull about, looking at them. Dad, it's me, Paper Jam, and Error's here too. We came to rescue you. Paper Jam? Error? Who are you? Said the voice from Ink. I had a bad feeling about this. Someone else's soul is in his body right now, said Error. As Ink sat up, PJ looked to Error. Shouldn't he still have his memories, even if it's someone else's soul? Different world, different rules. Error shook his head. Error released the soul as Ink went to stand. Limbs shaking, PJ offered to help him up. Ink's skull turned about, taking in their surroundings. Ink, what's the last thing you remember? Said Error. Looking at Error, the skeleton realized he was being asked the question. We were traveling, my friends and we were drinking. There was an argument. Gods, they murdered us. Ink clutched his skull. My dearest friends, how could they... They'd never do this. Me and the others, they dragged us into the street and... Stop, said Paper Jam, grabbing Ink's arms to calm him down. Whoever was talking, it wasn't Ink. This was the story of the soul. This was the story of the soul currently possessing his father, and letting them get upset would be of no use. It's okay. Those people who hurt you, they're not here. Ink covered his mouth, tears falling from the sockets. Leaning forward, PJ embraced him before looking back to Error. All right, now what? Error stood and shrugged. For now, this soul can keep Ink's body stabilized. There should be technology in the OT that can extract the soul without hurting him. You're not from this world, are you? Said Ink, pulling away from PJ's arms. I've never seen undead like you before. What do you want with me? Well, my name is Paper Jam, and that body that you're in belongs to my father, Ink. We came to bring him home. Something terrible is happening in our world and we need him desperately. Ink held up his hands. Something terrible is happening here too. My world is dying. I'm the only one keeping it alive. PJ shook his head. There's no one left here but you. There's no other souls in this place. If you come with us, we can help you find a new home. The skeleton backed away, shaking his head. This is my home. PJ, I don't think we're going to be able to negotiate with him, said Error. What are you suggesting? At that, Error pulled strings from his tears, throwing it at Ink, tying him up. Force. Error, what are you... started PJ before Ink roared. Red eyelights appeared as his fingers flared with magic. Strange words came from Ink as the floor burst into flames. Luckily, the suits protected PJ and Error as they ran from the cabin, both grabbing Ink and falling into the mud. Ink struggled as Error attempted to restrain him with more strings. Error, this isn't right, said PJ. We don't have time to play games with lost souls. The longer we wait, the more time Nightmare has... Error had looked over his shoulder to PJ when Ink headbutted Error in the temple with a hard crack. He glitched out as Ink kicked him off and leapt to his feet. Wait, stop! We don't want to hurt you! Said PJ, torn between reaching for Ink and checking on Error. You attacked me! Ink hissed. I'm not going with you! Yes, I know, I'm sorry, but please. You're inside my father's body. We need him back. I need him back. At that, the skeleton did look sorrowful. A shake of his head, and still freeing himself from the strings, he backed up. I'm sorry, but this is the only way to protect my world, too. Stronger than I thought, Eric grunted, rubbing his skull. We'll hurt him if you try to get him out of here. We need Dream. I think he's the only one who'd be able to get this soul to leave this AU. Maybe not if you hadn't attacked him, PJ huffed and looked back to Ink, who finished freeing his arms. Listen, we can help you. We can get a new body in the Omega timeline. We can find a way to save your world. Paper Jam, he heard Eric growl, recalling his warning. Ink looked between Eric and PJ and shook his head. I'm sorry, I can't trust either of you. Then he turned to run before teleporting from sight. No, wait, please! PJ cried in panic. He grabbed his skull, breathing heavily. I can't lose him again! PJ, you head back. I'll hunt him down. Error started. PJ whipped around, rage in his eyes. What the hell is wrong with you? Because of you, we might have lost ink forever. Calm down, I'll handle it, Error said, holding up his hands. Oh yes, because clearly you were so good at handling it before. PJ, listen, said Error, grabbing his arms. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, that was stupid of me, I admit it. A shake of the head. But we don't have time to fight. I won't hurt him, I promise. I'll just keep track of him and wait for you to return with Dream. Error had touched him willingly. Quietly, PJ looked at Error's hands before Error let the young skeleton go. PJ rubbed his arms. And what if we can't save Dream? You'll be trapped down here too. Error gave a defeated shrug. Then that'll be my karma. I promise to watch over your father. He'll be safe until you return. What other choice did they have? Just another failure. PJ gazed silently behind them at the cabin, covered in flame and smoke. Error approached, summoning more strings to tighten PJ's upper sleeves, so they wouldn't leak air. Shaking his head, tears in his sockets, PJ lowered the helmet glass. The young skeleton reached for the green strings around his waist, about to give the signal to Gradient to pull him back. Error, don't get killed down here. I really don't want to try to bring you back from the dead, too. Ah, hate me that much? Error tilted his brow with a grin. That's not what I mean. I know what you mean, Error nodded, and I won't. Even though he knew better, PJ couldn't help but pull Error into a hug. You better not. I can't lose both of you. Error stiffened a little, but returned the embrace. You won't, I promise.